With a very special guest who's going to chat with us about ecotourism. So we know Esther. She's a writer friend of mine, and she's written several books about her experiences as a tour guide in really awesome places in the world. But now she's going to break down what it's like to be that guide in the world where there's climate change, there's lots of, sensitive ecosystems. Esther's going to share some really valuable information with us. So thank you for coming back to the podcast with a totally different point of view, Esther. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you, Brianna. It's my pleasure to be here. Well, we'll be talking about a lot of other issues related to sustainable tourism and ecotourism, because, guiding was something that I sort of did, but I was not really a guide. I worked as like a tour manager, tour director, but I had a lot of interaction with guides. And when I was teaching sustainable tourism development, guiding was one of the areas that I really enjoyed teaching and writing about. Go for it.
Let's go to the basics. What is ecotourism and why should we care? Or sustainable tourism?
Right. Well, ecotourism is nature-based type of tourism. Then it's some people call it the face of sustainable tourism because it's a word that we started with ecotourism and then slowly evolved to sustainable tourism. But ecotourism really is sustainable tourism. When did it start? Well, a lot of people say that what started this interest for nature-based tourism was basically the demise of the near demise of the humpback whales. And it was back in the 1960s, about the mid-60s, when the scientific community started noticing that species was rapidly, disappearing. So they sent out the alarm, so to speak. And, in 1963, Australia was the first country to protect the species. And then in 1965, a lot of other nations around the world had come up with, similar safeguards. And here in the United States, it was not until the 1970 actually, that the species was protected. Wow. And it really started with the scientific community in California who were leading these scientific expeditions to see what's going on with the humpback whales, that started inviting local people, regular people, to come along on the expeditions. They wanted to really excite the people about what was going on and bring up awareness. So that was really, you can say, the beginning of whale watching, for example, because people started going on these expeditions as guests, and then they were talking to their friends and other people, and it grew into larger numbers, and we have whale watching. So as you can see, people can only love what they know, because if you don't understand what's going on, you don't care for that issue or for that species or for whatever is going on. You really need to experience it to appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, and it's interesting too, sorry to cut you off, but it was really important to build awareness, to have all these people and to see the whales and everything and give them a sense of what was being destroyed. But then equally, you're creating more interference in a way. And this is just me totally going off topic and just thinking extemporaneously, by putting more boats in the water and using more fuels and having more people in the water. So I just went down a rabbit hole in my mind. It's really good, but also there's a balance.
Unfortunately, that can happen because if it's not well organized, that definitely can happen. And this is why ecotourism and then sustainable tourism came up with guidelines and safeguards. And this is why it's so important to educate the guides as well as the tour operators, so that then they can, instill this awareness and, this knowledge in the clientele or in the tourists. So, and we'll talk about it later. Why is it I think, why is it so much more expensive to go on an eco tour, on a sustainable tour versus mass tourism?
Yeah, you can get into it now if you want to. Go for it. If it's in your brain, go for it.
Yeah, so the reason is that, when you are truly practicing sustainability, you are looking at the three big areas of sustainability, which is the environment, the natural environment, the socio-cultural environment, and the economy. So these are three very important pillars. That's really what sustains life to be, basically the world. So if you are not paying attention to this, it results in a very disorganized activity, regardless what the activity is. So as such, you need to train the people that work in hotels. They need to understand why, what is sustainability, what to use, whether it's the pools in the hotels, what kind of chemicals are we using so that it's not detrimental to the environment, detergents that you use in your laundry room, the food that you buy, is it organic? Where are you buying from? Are you buying from local producers, or is it from another continent on an airplane? So all of these is very important. The guides, do they really know their community? Basically, if it's a local guide, it's someone who is knowledgeable about the community.
I get it.
But, sometimes they might be knowledgeable, but they don't know how to transmit this knowledge, this information to the tourists. So they need to be trained. So training can also be costly. So there is, the local restaurant. What are they also using? Are they using local produce or not? Is it, again, being flown in? So there are so many issues to look at to be sustainable in tour. I'm speaking now just about tourism because we need to be sustainable in every aspect of life. But I'm talking about tourism there, and this is what can make it more expensive because the people who are operating tourism are also making big investments so that they have quality tourism, and of course they have to charge for it.
Yeah.
It's why sometimes we think, yeah, I'd like to, but look at that tour. If I go on, XYZ, it's a lot more expensive than if I take ABC. Yeah, but that's why it's important that people understand why it's more expensive, and at the same time, why we need to support that kind of tourism. When I was teaching, sometimes we conducted interviews, and some of the questions were, if you knew that a certain percent of your dollar was going into a local community, would you go with this tour operator versus one that is, doesn't contribute to the local economy as much or to some local project? And people always said, yes, I would go with the one that is contributing to a local project or to a local charity. So people want to help, but sometimes they're not even, sometimes the tourist is not really aware of these issues.
So what implications that we might not be aware of does travel have on communities, school environments, places that people go? Like I look at Valencia, for example, and it's rated currently for this year to like the number one city for expats to move to. And you can see the influx of people in the 2 years that I've been here. Even though this is an expat immigration, I think they kind of tie in together, because people want to come visit before they know. So we understand, there's certain sustainability issues, but is there anything that we might not be aware of as tourists or, immigrants from other places?
Well, one thing that we are not aware of is the huge stress that we are placing on the resources, whether it's, a water resource. When you go to a place, especially like southern Spain, we know that there is a problem with water. There are droughts, and you go to a hotel and you as a tourist, you just want to take your shower. You couldn't care less if it's a 5-minute shower or a 10-minute shower. So that's one thing. Another thing is the huge amount of waste that is left behind or that we contribute to. Another issue, especially with expats, they go to a place, they fall in love, they want to buy it. Oftentimes they overbid the local people. So they will pay almost because it's cheaper for them. Oh, this apartment is only 50,000. 50,000 is nothing for, say, someone who comes from the US or from Canada or another rich person from any other part of the world. But for a local person, that might be a lot of money and it's almost unaffordable. Whereas if there wasn't that foreigner paying whatever money is being asked and outbidding the local could get that for the price, which might be, 30,000. I'm just throwing out numbers. The infrastructure that needs to go to accommodate more people in a place that might be already a little bit, overpopulated or stressed or resource stressed. It's the roads, it's the hotels, it's the reduction of habitat. Because when you build new complexes, I see it happening here in my own area in St. Augustine. A huge amount of deforestation is taking place to accommodate housing for people who all of a sudden came here to visit, fell in love, and now they want to stay here. So all of these, reduction of habitat obviously depletes plant life, the wildlife as well. We have a lot of roadkills now because of the displacement of the animals. These are some of the negative implications I can think of. But on the other hand, when you go to a different place, you can also contribute by, I would say, for example, participating in local meetings. If you go to your local town hall, find out what's going on, ask questions, because sometimes it's not just telling them what to do, but you can ask certain questions that might trigger something that the locals are not thinking about, and they might say, oh, that's a good idea. And you could even help with your know-how because you might have an expertise in an area where you could volunteer and say, oh, I could help with that. So, there are pros and cons. The thing is, it's to get that balance, which is always not easy.
It is so tricky because there's you want to contribute to the local community and you want to see it grow and thrive, but you also want to maintain the integrity of the area. And that's one thing I'll say. Valencianos, from my experience in particular, they're very warm and welcoming, but they're also very protective of like their culture, their way of life. And as much as they appreciate the tourism and the growth and the notoriety that the city is getting, they're also like, well, this is how we do it. So just because you do it that way where you are doesn't mean we're necessarily going to adapt that. But they're always willing to listen, which is really nice. So you can feel like you have a voice, even if they're like, no, we're not going to do that. We don't want this. We don't want that. So it's kind of good in a way, to have that, like, to have that adherence to traditions, I think.
Well, it's very important to be, delicate and to act kind of as a guest and present things in a way that are not going to hurt somebody's ego or culture or way of thinking. And this is why, when we were training guides, that was one thing that was always up front, how do we communicate about whether it's a natural area or a cultural area? One thing that is always important is, ask people questions, how do you do it in your country? How is this different? What do you think? And because when we ask questions, we are also learning,
Absolutely.
It's a two-way street. So
get curious, yeah.
It's always good to take into attention, the national pride as well and local pride.
Absolutely. So are there any misconceptions or myths out there about sustainability and ecotourism that come to mind?
Well, I kind of touched upon it already. One is that, it's very elitist. It's just for the rich people, and we can't go because, that's only for, National Geographic people or whatever. So, yes, it's expensive for, those tours might be more expensive for the reasons, I addressed, because local operators are a lot more involved in sustainability, and therefore, they have to pay for it. So I would say that the biggest myth out there is, well, it is more expensive, but what I'm trying to say is that all tourism should be sustainable. Therefore, we should all be aware that if you go to some place, don't expect to, just because you're coming from a more developed or a richer country, just don't expect that everything is going to be $5, a meal, or $5 for a ride somewhere. So you need to really understand that tourism is growing in a way that, never seen before. Some countries, for example, Norway, just yesterday I was reading about it, is planning on a tourist fee. So if you want to visit Norway, you have to pay a certain fee. I don't know what it's going to be. Other countries are coming up with this, either paying a fee or putting caps on the numbers that can visit the place. So that's something that will be very soon for probably across the border, not just certain countries.
Did in the EU now you have to pay, I don't know if it's necessarily related to tourism, but to enter the EU now, most places are implementing a tax as well. So I don't know, again, if it's related to tourism, but some countries started in April, some started in May. And I think it is to kind of curb some, some
the
costs.
numbers.
Yeah. So, and I know the US and not the EU, the UK. So I know that my son's father is British, and so he always had to travel with an Ester to the United States, which is just like an agreement that you don't need a visa, but you pay a tax to enter the country. And the UK just this year is implementing the same thing for Americans, for people with an American passport. So could all be tied together because of that.
It's a visa. I think they call it a visa thing, that you pay. But from what I understood, and I can't check because I have still some students and colleagues in Norway, I can find out what's going on. But this was specifically like a tourist tax that you pay to go into the country. And, when you talk of numbers, before I was just going nuts when I was reading some statistics. I went to Antarctica for the first time in 1980. It was the season of 82, 83. And that year, there were 2 ships going down there, and it had a total during the season of 1,000 visitors. In the season of 2023-2024, last season, there were 122,079 tourists in 72 ships. Of those 122,079 people, about 79,000 actually landed in Antarctica, meaning they used the Zodiac or a tender or something to visit.
Wow.
So the others just saw it from the ship, because luckily Antarctica has some regulations in place, and so only so many people can make a landing per day in a certain stop. So the ships have to be constantly communicating so that they don't arrive at the same place at the same time and put down thousands of people. So you see this happening. Machu Picchu, they are also, coming up with numbers, how many people can visit. And well, Petra was doing that in the past, but now, since there isn't so much tourism going to Jordan, I don't believe they have it in place. But this is what's happening. Okay, there are many factors that contribute to this. Of course, people have more disposable income. The younger people want to travel. We don't have the limitations we had before with visas, even though they might be coming into place. But to some extent, I also blame travel writers who have written things like the best kept secret. Of course, the moment they write about that place, it's no longer a secret, and the place, is going to be over-visited. Portugal is one of the oldest countries in the world, and until, very recently, people didn't even know where it was. And now my friends are all complaining about how overvisited it is to a restaurant. I mean, the restaurants are full, and the locals, of course, they become a little bit resentful because now the restaurant where they used to go every Sunday, they can't get in because it's full of people all the time. So you see, this is again a problem, and I don't really know how to fix it, because even if you put a tourist fee and you cap the numbers in one place, people will go to another place, and then that is again becomes a problem. So yeah,
I think it's good just to have the conversation. It's like it's not black or white, it's very gray. Like in one respect, we see it in Florida. You have this great tourism industry, you have these beautiful beaches, you have the theme parks, you have the manatees, the coral reef off the coast, all of the things, blah blah. And then, so you get all this draw and people get to escape and they get to, have that beach life and blah blah blah. But it does impact the water. It does impact the local economy. It does impact, the supply chain when it comes to fruits, vegetables, all of the things, And going back to your point, there's this aerial view of St. Augustine. I saw it not that long ago. And just like the development over the last like 20, 30 years of and you see the ecosystems just like being, absorbed by houses and developments. And I love St. Augustine. It's a beautiful nook, it's a beautiful part of the world. Absolutely. But then you see that the impact that humans are having on the area, and you're just like, oh, that's interesting. I again don't have a solution because there's 8 billion people on this planet, so it's hard to tell everybody what rules to follow, but it is something that we should be aware of. And then also going back to your point, because I was going to ask these questions anyway, about just, the things that impacts in terms of food, water waste, etc. Spain was in a drought for the last few years. And, unfortunately, we got a lot of rain in the last 6-8 months, which caused some devastation.
Problems as well.
In my part of the, the society here, but it was much needed rain, it was very, very needed. And unfortunately, a lot of people died to get that much needed rain. But we saw the same thing in California when I lived there. It was droughts. You got water, rotations and things like that. It wasn't quite that bad here in Valencia. But you just think sometimes you're going to this beautiful place, and I'm guilty of it too. I love getting on a plane and going somewhere. So I'm part of the problem. Also trying to be part of the solution, which is why I'm talking to you. But I think it's really important that we highlight these things. Just the produce. Like, I look for things that are Europe. Was it grown in Spain? Which we're very fortunate in Spain to be able to grow a lot of products year round, but even if am I going to pay $1 for the bananas from Peru, or, €2, dollars, €2 for the plantanos from the Canary Islands? Well, Canary Islands are a little closer, so I should probably pay the extra euro, knowing that it's slightly more.
It's local too.
Local, there, it's so. I just like that you highlighted those, because I think these are things that, of course, go have fun, of course, enjoy your life. That's not what I'm saying, but equally know what your fingerprint is when you go somewhere. And one thing that we talk about that I'm not quite well versed on, and maybe you have some insight too, but is our carbon footprint. Like, do you know what that means, and why should we care about it?
Well, carbon footprint refers to the total amount of greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, CO2, and methane, especially these two, that are generated by our activities, by human activities. So that's basically what it means. So, of course, the more we fly, the more we build bigger houses, the more we use fossil fuels or machinery operated by fossil fuels, the bigger is our footprint. So that's why, it's important to reduce it as much as we can, because these gases are also contributing to global warming. We are seeing what's happening weather-wise around the world. It's all due to global warming. Not to speak of the increased acidity of the oceans, which interfere with development of shellfish and our reefs and so on and so forth. So it's huge. And that's why we need to adopt less impactful practices so that we can contribute.
Some of those practices be in terms of travel.
Well, but even I was just thinking, even things that you can do at home.
Go for it.
For example, little things. Sometimes we are tempted to run just half a load of laundry. So why don't we wait until we have a full load rather than using it over and over again? Take a 5-minute shower. We don't need to be there for 20 minutes because what you're going to wash, you wash it in 5 minutes. You don't need to have that water running forever.
Yeah. Tell that to my 7-year-old son. I don't know why he takes longer showers than me.
You need to tell him that there isn't so much water out there, and we need to be careful because the kid down the road also wants to take a shower. In terms of there are so many things with the clothing. I have been going to thrift shops because not lately, for the past maybe 20 years. First, because I loved it. I was, looking for little deals. And now I do it because our textile industry is one of the most polluting industries in the world. It's even more polluting than because the amount of resources that are used to create, not just to grow, let's say, if it's a natural fiber, cotton, linen, etc., the water that is used, but also the manufacturing. It's tremendous. So the amount of energy that is used. So in terms of travel, for example, aviation is also extremely detrimental to the environment.
Guilty. I'm so guilty of that.
I think we are all guilty, of that. And this is why lately, whenever I can, I have an electric car, but still, if I can use public transportation, I use it. I was just on a train trip recently and it took a little bit longer than the car, but I felt I didn't have to drive. I can do a lot of things while I'm just riding in comfort, and I'm contributing somewhat to a better environment. What was I going to say about aviation? Aviation releases about 2.5% of all of the CO2 released worldwide. Yeah, that's aviation. And it has contributed about 4% to global warming. I don't have the numbers for textiles, but since we were talking about tourism, that's what I got. And for example, if you take a shorter flight, let's say Lisbon to Madrid, which I believe it's about 500 kilometers, more or less. Yeah. That flight is contributing about 148 kilograms of CO2, or sending it into the atmosphere, which is about a quarter of a kilo per kilometer that it's releasing. And if you go by car, it's about 102 kilograms, so it's a little bit less. And if you go by train, it's 35 grams per kilogram. If you use the Eurostar in Europe, it only means 4 grams per kilogram. It really pays to use the train or other public transportation. And the interesting thing is that I didn't really realize until just recently that the shorter the plane ride, the more polluting it is, because of it's during takeoff and landing that the planes emit the most.
I did know that. But yeah. So you think, it's a shorter flight, less fuel is being used, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not. It's actually better to take the longer haul flight. Right.
So that's, very, very interesting. So, so I think we got a little bit kind of...
No, it's good. No, you're all over the place, and it's perfect because all of these things are kind of interconnected. One thing I wanted to bring up is this week in Nice, France, they're doing the... it's like the Ocean Decade. It's the UN's conference on like ocean plastics and stuff. And so I've been doing a lot of research with a friend just to kind of like get ideas on things. And one of the things, it's not necessarily related to tourism at all whatsoever, but it's just like the sustainability of the products that we use and how much just like plastic is in everything. It's absurd. And then I very off topic, but very essential to say, it's like I've found a statistic about like feminine care products and how like 90% of most feminine care products that women have used in recent decades are like 90% plastic. And you're just like, what? Yeah. Like that is just so crazy to me.
The stuff, that you wash your face with, it's full of tiny, tiny microplastics. It's like the scrub that you use. Most of it it's not natural materials. It's microplastics, which then get into the water stream, which then get into fish and other wildlife. And then we eat the fish.
Exactly.
I don't know if you read recently a study that came out of the UK on microplastics. They did autopsies on several brains.
Oh, wow.
I forgot how many. And they found a huge amount of microplastics in the brain, 70% more in the brain than in other vital organs like the liver, kidneys, etc.
Interesting.
It's amazing. They don't know why, the brain, but they speculate that, it's a softer material that absorbs it more rapidly. And that study was replicated in Brazil just, I think, 3-4 months ago. And they came out with exactly the same findings. So then we wonder why we have so much, whether it's Alzheimer's, dementia, or what have you, when this stuff is accumulating where, out there. It's not part of our makeup. It doesn't belong in the body.
Doesn't. Oh, it's. I'm gonna have to look that study up. So, okay, now that I'll get us back on track because you're talking about all these things, and I think it's really good to highlight, but we would need a whole nother podcast for sustainability. And I think it's good that you're highlighting the little things that we can do at home, whether it's shorter shower, full this,
compost your food, compost the trimmings from your vegetables. All of that are things that we can help. It not only reduces the amount of waste, trash, but contributes to your garden if you have a garden. Or if you don't have a garden, see if your municipality has or offers that opportunity to take the, compost for farmers, for example.
Yeah.
They do that in Norway. For example, they do that in Norway. That was already more than 20 years ago when I saw it happening in Norway, where people have different trash bins outside, and the brown one is for compost.
Oh my gosh, I do love that about Spain. One of my favorite things is my 4-compartment trash can for like glass, paper, compost, and
that's great. They put the composting in.
And I was looking at, again, doing some research, looking at some of the statistics about Spain and our the carbon imprint and the waste that we have, and it's one of the lowest in Europe. I don't want to say the lowest, but their processes they have here are very effective from what I see. And I see the different trash trucks come on different days, and they're getting the paper, and then they're getting the glass. Declan likes when the glass trash can comes because he can hear the crashing. He loves that. So it's something so simple, and we think it's annoying, but let me tell you what, I love my 4-compartment trash can. It's the best thing I've ever purchased. Is there anything we need to consider as we explore these new environments in terms of whether they're urban or rural? Is there any different way of approaching these environments that we should know?
Well, I think we should be a lot more careful when we go into a rural area, because people are not as exposed. Usually they're not as exposed to outsiders, to visitors, as people in the big cities. Mm-hmm. So the way you behave yourself, even the way we dress, we should be very respectful, especially if you're going to a more traditional rural area. If it's summer, of course, we all want to go in shorts and, almost topless. So we need to kind of be aware that these things could be offensive. Another thing that I would like to mention is when you go in, especially into rural areas, and if you have a chance to interact with the locals, also, or whether you are able to speak the language or you do it through a guide, again, that's why it's so important to have a guide. Ask them questions about their lives, be engaged. If you want to buy a souvenir, buy a local souvenir that is made locally versus buying something in the city that comes from a shop that brings it from, across the ocean. The trinkets that, oftentimes you put it in your suitcase, by the time you get home, it's already broken. So buy something that is authentic, that is made locally, because this also gives pride to the local people. It's like, they appreciate our culture. And you might be buying, something that it's truly unique and that you'll treasure for the rest of of your life. Like I have a lot of, a lot of my stuff up there. I have things there from Burma when it was called Burma. Now it's Myanmar. I bought it in little villages where people were actually making the carvings, and you talk to the people or you gesture and you say, oh, this is so beautiful. In the city, you don't have the opportunity so much to interact with people because people are in a rush. The local people are rushing to work or from work, and they may not be as approachable. But in rural areas, it's really an opportunity to learn about the country and the local culture. But at the same time, you need to be very respectful.
I like that you said that. I always try to find something that represents or is iconic of the culture. Like when I was in Lisbon, I got like a rooster, like or a chicken. Like, yeah. And then when I was in Greece, I got like the eye. Oh my God, I'm blanking on what it means. It's not the third eye. It's about like spiritual freedom or
I know. Yeah.
Self-awareness or something. It's really
Yes.
beautiful. So I like that you said that because you can come back with a lot of stuff, but like what represents that culture is meaningful to the locals.
Absolutely. And you are contributing to the local economy as well, because you're paying that artisan that, may have no other way or no other means of getting some income. But if you buy from him or from her.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we talked a lot about like air and land travel. Is there anything we need to think about if we're doing travel or ecotourism in the water? Things that we should take note about?
One thing that comes right away to mind is the type of sunblock that you use. Some of those lotions are detrimental to sea life, especially around coral reefs. So make sure that you buy something that is coral reef safe as far as sun lotion. If you go fishing, make sure that you pick up the little bits of line and bait and what have you. Don't leave it behind because it's going to end up in the water and it could affect some animals. I remember when I was teaching one time, taking the students to the aquarium, and there was a manatee that was very skinny around the waist. And it just so happened that as a baby, it had swum through a plastic ring, and the plastic ring stayed there. And as it grew, there was algae in that part. So eventually it was rescued by marine biologists. They caught it and they put it in the aquarium. So be very careful about the debris, the stuff you leave behind, especially, plastics, aluminum cans. I mean, it's very important to take the trash with you and dispose of it, in a safe way. What else? Boating. If you are boating, make sure that you respect signage, whether it's, manatee zone or residential zone. If you go boating and you bring whatever you bring with you for your picnic, don't throw it into the water because, fish are not used to to whatever you have left over from your sandwich. That's not the food they like. These are the things that, come to mind as far as being respectful of the water, of water activities.
I think that's a really good one. I always forget about the sunscreen one too, but that makes I think because living in Florida, I'm just, I've done all that research like before. You kind of like have to be cognizant of that. And I was going to say something else and I just totally blanked on it.
We talked about the carbon footprint, and I would like to elaborate a little bit on that. If
Sure.
You don't mind.
Absolutely.
Because we could also be carbon neutral to some extent. Carbon neutrality refers to, reducing our CO2 footprint, whether, at the individual level, at a business level, town level, or nation level. We all need to really make it happen. And to be carbon neutral, it means that even though you're going to have some emissions when you are manufacturing something, say an electric car, because there will be emissions. But down the line, just the fact that you have an electric car, which is not running on fossil fuels, and especially if you charge it, if it's solar charged, by a source versus any other energy source, down the line, you are reducing your footprint because it comes a point where your impact is neutral. Because yes, the car took say 100 or 10 of energy to be produced, but down the line it's going to save over hundreds of energy. So this is why solar energy or any other alternative energy is important. Wind energy, even wave energy are important to be researched and used in a much larger way than we are doing it now. Because what we see, as I said, global warming is happening. All the storms we are experiencing, all the different weather patterns that they were heard of, but they didn't happen as constantly as they are happening now. All of this has a lot to do with our contribution to CO2.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to note as well. Oh my goodness, I feel like we've covered so much. Is there anything that I'm missing? Is there anything we should else that we could consider, think about, or just be aware of that we haven't touched on?
No, I think we have touched it, here and there and everywhere, but really it's very important, especially when we travel, to do our research about the place and to learn before you go, so that you know what to expect and you know what to respect. You know what to buy, and you understand that if I eat in this place, I'm contributing to the local economy. But if I eat in one of those big chain restaurants, that money is all leaking out of the country, so very little stays. Try to use restaurants that use also local hire a guide. I mean, I am so much into hiring a local guide because you learn so much more. You go away with a much larger experience, because oftentimes when we travel, the guide is really the only local person you get to meet, because you are seeing this and that, or if you are in a big city, you are surrounded by other foreigners. But if you have a guide, it gives you go away with a much larger knowledge, a much larger opinion. I mean, your experience is tenfold versus just kind of, I'm going to do it on my own. I've been there before. I buy a guide, and it's not the same. That's person to person. The other thing about sustainable tourism is that the groups are smaller. You are usually with a group of 15, 16 people with one guide. You don't go with a bus full of people, 30 people, and one guide who, of course, will tell you left, right, and this and that, but is not able to have that one-on-one contact, and therefore or even to maintain certain disciplines, so that people don't inadvertently, for example, if they're in a natural area, they might be walking on some wildlife habitat where they shouldn't be. It's dangerous for them, it's dangerous for the wildlife. Or go into, especially if you are in an historical area that is also residential, walk into somebody's house just because you think, well, that's, can do this. So anyway, that's
a good point, actually. Some of those things, some of the houses, especially around here, they're like, is that a restaurant or not?
This is so quaint, when you go, you take a picture, even though the lady is there at the door, and you don't even ask, can I take a picture? Just take a picture. And, when you go with a guide, I mean, that's how it should be if it doesn't happen. But usually what happens is the guide gives you a lot of information up front about do's and don'ts as well.
Yes, that's a good point too. It's like some things you might not know to research because it's not the way you're socialized, or, it's just different culture, like here, Valencia is known for its oranges, right? One of the things it's known for, but you don't eat the oranges in the city. They're so bitter. You have to get the ones from the orange groves, but the oranges so it's just little things like that where you just you don't think about it, but because you don't live there, you don't know, don't touch the fruit.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not good. Okay, Esther, so we've talked about so many different things. I just want to go back and, just for clarity's sake, tell us exactly what sustainable tourism is.
Well, there are several definitions out there, but all of them address the three main areas of life, actually. But I actually used the United Nations definition, which basically says that sustainable tourism is tourism that meets the needs of tourists while protecting the integrity of cultural, natural, and economic resources of the place where the activity is actually being undertaken. In other words, it addresses equally the three main pillars of life, which is, the natural environment, the cultural environment, and the economy. We tend just to kind of look at the economy, and that's, what's the bottom line, and we forget the other two resources, which are equally important, if not more important, because if you don't have a nice, clean, healthy environment, people don't want to go there, and it's not good for the activity, let alone for the people who live there. If you don't maintain the authenticity of the local cultural environment, the same thing, nobody wants to go and visit something that it's a fake. Because we see so many things going on. Oh, this is authentic, and it's not. It's just, put out there for the tourist to see. And of course, the economy is very important, but without those two, you cannot have a good economy that sustains the local people as well as, the well-being of future generations. So basically, that's what, sustainable tourism is, or any sustainable activity looks at those three areas equally.
Now, this is just something I thought of as you were talking. Do you think that it is, or in your experience, do you think when it comes to touristic practices, so people who are traveling around, do you think that laws are better to maintain the integrity of an environment? Or is it just like education and awareness of the individual tourist that could be better so that they know how to treat the local environment?
Well, actually, I think it's a little bit of each, because, people are people. And even though you might educate them and make them aware, sometimes, they like to do something different that it's in their thinking may not be impacting the environment or the culture. But so that's why it's important to have, certain rules in place, as well as signage, so that people don't go over or go into a place where they shouldn't be. I'm thinking particularly of this one time I was in the Galapagos, and there was this cute tourist, a pretty young girl. And this was, a long time ago, in the days when people were smoking everywhere. And here we are, one of the most pristine environments in the world, and she is smoking, and then she puts out the cigarette right there where are blue-footed,
Blue-footed boobies?
boobies. And the guide, just looks the other way because, this is, a very pretty girl. So he doesn't really go to her and tell her don't do it. So this is why I'm saying, people are people, and we sometimes, even though we know we shouldn't, but we try to get away with something. This is why it's also very important to have signage in place so that, you don't have someone telling you all the time, don't do this, don't do that. You can read. And if you do it, it's wrong. And the guide can interfere and say something, sorry, did you see that sign? So actually, I think we need a little bit of both, the education and some rules in place.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I like that you pointed out that Galapagos situation when we were in the Acropolis in Athens, the main one. These girls, especially in the age of the influencer, they're like, crossing the boundaries where there's clear signage and clear, do not cross, because there are ancient marbles that, it's just in there, it is what it is. And then, the great thing about the Acropolis is that there are undercover security everywhere, and they do not mess around. But you're just you see the sign, it's roped off, but you're trying to get something for your social media, and it's like, are you kidding me? This is a World Heritage Site. These are delicate things. They've removed certain parts of the Acropolis and put in replicas because of idiots like you. You're just and because, to maintain the statues and the structures and fall apart. So I think it's really great that you said that, because I'm just, sometimes I look at people and I'm like, do you have any integrity or respect? Because You're really making the human race shine right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we actually need, yes, that's why we need a little bit of, of both the education and some, rules and regulations in place.
But the one other thing I wanted to share, I don't know if I've shared this with you before, but like, my son is like a little fish, it loves to swim, loves the water, all the things. And one time we were in Puerto Rico and he was picking up like plastic bags off the street and throwing them away because we had gone to the Florida Keys and gone to the turtle hospital there and learned that all the sea turtles are the #1 predators of jellyfish, and without them, we wouldn't be able to get in the waters because it would be like overflow of jellyfish. But, turtles confuse plastic bags for jellyfish. And so he, to this day, will still try to pick up trash off the street because he doesn't want the sea turtles to eat the plastic and confuse them for jellyfish. And I think that has never left me because it's such a like, oh my God, of course it's going to think it's a jellyfish just floating around in the water. And we just don't think sometimes how careless, we can be. And so
can be. Well, I do that here when we go very often to the beach for walks. That's one of our favorite things. I always take a plastic bag with me and I pick up
what you find.
Whatever I find. Plastic bags I find, but you know what I find a lot that people leave behind are the little toys, that kids play with at the beach. Yeah. Why do they leave the pail or the little shovel or the little starfish, plastic starfish behind? But But anyway, your son is doing very good. You have brought him up. You are bringing him up very well. Congratulations.
That's all him. He's giving me an education, and I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. You don't know what you don't know until you learn it. Well, Esther, thank you so much for sharing your insight and expertise. I really appreciate you sharing your time with me. I hope that anybody who tunes in has learned something they didn't know they needed to.